Our objective was a political objective, to create a new political aspect of the war so the world can see that not even a strong and well-equipped army like the American Armed Forces can repress a nation when it rises.
The VC and NVA had been slowly winning the Vietnamese War long before American units landed at Da Nang in March 1965 to prop up the collapsing Saigon regime. By 1967, subsequent massive U.S. buildup of ground units, supported by artillery and jets, had created an expectation of coming victory in American public opinion. Now, with the Tet Offensive, Ho Chi Minh intended to seize the initiative again, no matter how high the cost.
I've heard comment that the Tet Offensive was our last big show by the North to try and change the balance of the war. It certainly did a lot to discredit the American involvement in the eyes of the people in continental USA. I'm not sure, however, that it really was that last gasp of action from the North. They had the resources to continue. They would have continued. They'd still be fighting today if America hadn't withdrawn.
The first phase of Tet actually began with a series of attacks in late 1967 in the most remote border areas of Vietnam. These attacks were intended to lure American military power away from protecting the urban population centers and expose the South Vietnamese army to attack.
The South Vietnamese soldiers, from my point of view, were never equal to the American soldiers, and neither were their commanding officers. Every time we fought them, they ran away, knowing that they could find refuge in their families. They didn't care about discipline when they lost a battle because their commanding officers also ran away.
For 7 months, the VC had been secretly bringing arms and munitions into the cities and countryside, pre-stocking the battlefield, as was their established practice. Guerrillas posing as taxi drivers, shopkeepers, prostitutes, even police officers, hid themselves easily among the general population.
I moved openly, disguised as a wealthy capitalist, driving in a Mercedes car, with the chauffeur dressed in the enemy uniform, back and forth, to see if anything had changed in order to modify our plans.
They were Vietnamese. All they had to do was walk down the road in anything other than black pajamas, or even in black pajamas, since lots of people wore those anyway, and you'd have no idea that they were on the other side.
The VC relied on the support of many local people who provided them with intelligence, with messengers, with assistance in every way.
Before we attacked the U.S. Embassy, the young shoeshine boys and employees working there provided us the information about the dispositions of all the guard posts, so we knew everything ahead of time.
The unparalleled intensity and magnitude of the attack stunned the American and South Vietnamese governments. No Vietcong main force unit had ever attempted to attack a city before, let alone all the major urban areas simultaneously.
You have to excuse me, but I have to say this. The CIA spies were numerous here. We knew that. But to detect us was quite difficult for them. They could detect big things from the satellites going to the moon, but they couldn't detect our force.
The Americans were like actors on a stage in a darkened theater. Everything they did was witnessed by an unseen enemy who was the audience. The Americans finally realized after Tet that they were strangers in a strange land.
It was like being on the moon. We were aliens, and the people no way saw us as the liberators, but down in their hearts they saw us as the evil one, as the enemy. They did everything that they could to deceive us and to provide support to the North Vietnamese or the Vietcong.
The most successful VC assault was at the city of Hue. 2 main force Vietcong battalions, over 1,000 men, had hidden themselves in this graveyard only 300 meters from a South Vietnamese base.
Our first objective was the Saigon troops, generally speaking. But truly, our main objectives were also the enemy administration systems that domineered the cities and districts. We knew that once we attacked the Saigon troops and these controlling administration systems, the Americans would interfere. So they were also our objective, and our predictions were right.
On a prearranged signal, the main force Vietcong 6th Division attacked and occupied the citadel, a walled fort inside the city surrounded by a moat.
This is the Dong Ba Gate, one of the 10 gates of the wall which surrounds Hue's urban areas. After a day of attacking, we occupied 8 of these bridges.
The battle for Hue lasted for more than a month, and fighting was fierce. The Vietcong 6th Division finally withdrew with heavy casualties. 1 year later, secret mass graves were discovered in Hue. While the VC had occupied the city during the battle, 3,000 men and women were executed and buried.
Very rarely was it reported that the main tactic of the Viet Cong in Phase 1 was terrorism. And they were not beyond going into a village where the village leader was supposedly supporting the government in the United States, taking one of his children, killing them, and placing the child's head on a post outside the village to let people know of their presence.
When we fought for our nation's liberation, we did not spare any opponent. We fought everyone. We are the troops whose function is to liberate the city, observing strictly our rules. We are fighting for the people. Therefore, we could never do such a thing. However, I repeat, some mistakes might occur during war that we cannot prevent.
The communist losses were high. The VC forces had over 65,000 dead during the first phase of their general offensive general uprising. By the end of the second and third phases in May and August of 1968, they'd suffered 20,000 additional battlefield deaths and many more wounded.
Right after the Tet Offensive in 1968, the American Army and South Vietnamese Army counterattacked and destroyed all the work we had spent 10 to 20 years building up. We couldn't get fresh troops from the South anymore. We had to use troops from the North. All our infrastructures in the South were wiped out. And so the North had to bear the total cost for the war effort in the South. I am telling you, the loss was horrible.
Within the Vietnamese Communist Party in the North, there were rivalries. Failed military operations were sometimes used to discredit or even destroy competing factions. Speculation remains about possible secret motives for ordering an attack doomed to failure.
This comment has been made that the Tet Offensive was just such an operation, and that the high loss of life on the Viet Cong NVA side was not considered to be that serious by Hanoi because it meant a cleansing of the party machine in the South. It's very difficult to be certain. I don't think we'll ever know that, because you can be sure that if the records exist, they've been altered.
A lot of this is difficult to prove. You get different stories from different people, both inside of Vietnam and outside of Vietnam. But we can safely say that their objectives were many. One of them was to make a wide-scale attack all the way across country to show that the American claims that we were winning were in fact not valid.
As gunfire echoed through the streets of Saigon and Hue, the United States would have to learn the puzzling ambiguity contained in a second NVA revolutionary slogan. When the tactics are right, but the strategy is wrong, battles may be won, but the war will be lost.